take over.
Thanks so much for coming out and having us here this evening. I'm glad to know amidst the weather you're here in the rain and the snow this morning. So thanks for taking the time and thanks for asking us to be here. I mean, we really appreciate it. So I hope that our time is helpful to kind of go over vocational habilitation and what that service is and what's going on at the state level that impacts you here. So that's my plan. So I don't have a formal presentation at all for you. I was just going to talk with you and give you an update about what's going on and then really take time to answer questions. So as you guys know and already were introduced, so I'm Stacy Collins. I'm just to give you a little bit of information. I've seen many familiar faces, so it's good to see you. But for those I haven't had the opportunity to meet, I am with, if you need me to speak up, holler at me. I am with the Ohio Department of Developmental Disabilities. I specifically work in our Policy and Strategic Direction Division. And so what I'm responsible for is leading what's called our Employment First initiative in Ohio and our work around Adult Day and employment services. I also have the opportunity to have been working on our transition age youth work, so doing a better job and partnering with our school districts and working with our other state agencies to make sure that we're helping more students with disabilities prepare for adulthood, what comes after school, whether that's living independently or not living independently, going to college, not going to college, preparing for employment. So I've had the opportunity to work under that. So I'm really glad to be here with you. Kelly Shuck, I'll let you talk a little bit about you and who you are, and she is part of our team. So I'm going to pass it on to Kelly.
I'm the Community Life Engagement Project Manager in the Northwest quadrant of the state, so I work in 24 counties in the Northwest quadrant of Ohio, including Allen County. I grew up in Northwest Ohio. I live in Wood County, so it's been nice to get out and see more of the communities that are in the Northwest and talk and work with county boards and families and individuals and provider agencies across the region. I joined the state about a year and a half, not quite a year and a half ago. Before that, I worked in Lucas County at the County Board of Developmental Disabilities for about 13 years, so that's me.
We're glad that Kelly joined us and said yes to join DODD. So it was a stressful couple weeks of her, like, is she gonna wanna come? So glad to have her here. We want to take a stronger role in partnering with our individuals and families, our county boards, and our providers across the state, because there have been a lot of changes that have occurred within our field over the last 6 years, and changes still coming, and so we wanted to be more active as much as possible to be a partner in all the work and what's going on. So in regards to employment, we've been working on this since about 2011. What we're trying to make sure that we're doing, I'm going to tell you, I'll talk a little bit about this piece, but then really just I want to answer questions and talk about Voc Hab. But in regards to employment, we've been working on it since 2011, and what we're really trying to make sure that we're doing is that we have a system of services that support individuals who want to work in the community. Okay, that's really it. It doesn't mean necessarily that everyone has to work in the community. That's not our goal. That's not our target, that 100% of people be working in the community. What we want to make sure, though, is 100% of people are being asked, do you want to work in the community? And if you say yes, then we've got services that are available, that have funding available that help you get there. Okay? If you don't want to work in the community, that there's still then opportunities and choices for you to get services that you need and services that are important to you. So we do have an array, and I can talk about those today, of services that are available to people. So we also, within our state system, are working to do that, make sure more people have the options who want to live, work, and play, right, in their community. But we also have pressures at the federal level about how we need to utilize services and what we're doing with services in our system. So one of the agencies that kind of oversees our services in Ohio is called the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services. That is, we get about 60% of funding from the federal government, from CMS, to fund services that I'm going to talk about today. And so when you take money, they dictate how services need to operate, how you need to use that money. And so a lot of the things I'm going to be talking about today do help us get to this larger, how do we have a balanced system that allow people to have the choice of where they want to get services, and if they want to get services in the community, how are we making sure that those services absolutely do that, but also stay in line with the regulations that we have. So some of the things I'm going to talk to you about today are things as the state that we want to do, that our stakeholders are telling us we need to do, and then part of it is things that we're regulated to do, okay? So talking about Voc Hab, what's going to be important? So vocational habilitation is the service that we're going to talk about today. We have a total of 6 different services that we consider in the adult day employment buckets. Does that make sense? And so we're going to be talking about one of those services today, which is that vocational habilitation service. You should have got a handout that kind of, can I borrow yours a second? Thank you. That really just starts in kind of an informational sheet about vocational habilitation. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Hopefully we'll have a few minutes to talk about other services, because truly we do feel we've got a very large array of services that can support somebody based off of need. Do we have every need addressed? No. But we need to start thinking about the services and how we use the services. So I'm going to talk about Voc Hab today. So you have it in front of me what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to throw the paper around. See, you should hand it to me. So sorry. We'll describe the Voc Hab service. We call it Voc Hab for short, so you're going to hear me call that. It's kind of our system slang about vocational habilitation. They're also on the back, goes over other services that we have. So I talked about there being 6 services. It talks about adult day support here, it's a service, individual employment supports, career planning, group employment supports, and transportation. So I'll answer any questions that you have about that. We are trying really hard at the state level to do more to make sure that we're comfortable in talking as a system. SSAs, our service and support administrators, our providers, our individuals and families, and knowing the services that our system has available for people and how you can use that service. If you're a family member, an individual, or if you're a provider, how you can provide that service. So, does that sound good? Hopefully covering what you're looking for. So Voc Hab is what I'm going to refer to as vocational habilitation. It's a service we'll talk about today. That is typically the service that you see happen in a what we call facility-based work setting or a sheltered workshop setting. Okay, so typically if somebody is working in a sheltered workshop and getting support to work in a sheltered workshop, there's typically a Medicaid service that comes along with that. And what Medicaid service is being authorized is the vocational habilitation service. Okay? So anybody's ISP or ISP, I promise I can usually communicate so much better. You were saying how much better? Like, no, not so much. So in service plans, the service authorized is vocational rehabilitation. It used to be what was called combo. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of that before. So combo code or combo was a combination of adult day and vocational rehabilitation. But that actually was, you can't combo them anymore because they're 2 distinctly different services. Adult day is not work-based, vocational rehabilitation is work-based. Okay? So in regards to vocational rehabilitation, there's a couple things I want to point out to you guys. Is vocational rehabilitation, how we've organized it in the state of Ohio, is we call it a pre-vocational service. Okay, so pre-vocational is an important term. So when we communicate up to our federal partners to get funding, we have asked for funding for a pre-vocational service. That service is called vocational rehabilitation. One thing that I think you guys all know, it's important to remember, we had our system created in Ohio prior to us getting federal Medicaid dollars, okay? So we've been evolving our system and adding services and growing our system, but our adult day employment area existed before we took Medicaid funding. Does that make sense? And so when we decided as a state to take Medicaid funding, we needed to fund what was happening in our facility-based work, sheltered workshops. So we asked, hey, we'd like to have money. It's probably more complicated than that, but this is the easiest way. We want some money to help us serve more people, match our money better in Ohio to serve individuals who want to work. So we asked for pre-vocational services. funding for pre-vocational services. That service being pre-vocational in nature, what's really important that we've kind of lost sight about the last several years is it's pre-vocational. And so what I mean by that, by emphasizing it, it's intended to be a service that is really about pre-work, getting ready for work is the best way I can describe it, really building those general work skills, very basic, attendance, coming to work, following instructions, like learning a specific task. It's really intended to be very kind of intro level to work. That service, when we took those dollars many years ago, we said off the very beginning, the service is about being time limited. When I say time limited, what that means is the service is supposed to be used for only a short amount of time. Okay, that we have this pre-vocational service to build those general work skills that somebody needs, to get them ready for working in an enclave or getting them ready for working in the community, that we won't use it long term. So we have long term communicated to Medicaid that we use that service in that way, that it's really about kind of very beginning level. So what's happening in Ohio is we are not using it that way. So I'm going to get to the kind of what's happening current picture, but I wanted to just go over Voc Hab what it is. So general work skills, very general intro to work. You use it for a very short amount of time, right, to help build somebody the skills that they need. And that Voc Hab service isn't intended to be this end of the road. I'm going to get the vocational habilitation service forever. It really was not, we didn't ask for that, but we've been using it that way, okay? So this informational sheet kind of really breaks it down. There is also a component of the vocational habilitation rule I will look at you and say, we did not know existed in the rule until last year. I have had the opportunity of being a vocational habilitation provider. I led and operated a very large sheltered workshop in Springfield, Ohio. Did not know the rule existed I'm going to tell you about the whole time I was doing that for about 12 years. We worked for a county board. We didn't know. So there's a part of the vocational habilitation rule, or the pre-voc, federal regulations, let me take it back. Our Voc Hab rule doesn't have it in it, but our federal rules do, that if somebody is getting a pre-vocational service, they can't earn more than 50% of minimum wage, because it's intended to be that very starting service, really about building those general work skills. And so if they get to a point where they're performing so well, they really shouldn't be making more than 50% of minimum wage, because if that's the case, they should be moving on to another service. Does that make sense? So in Ohio, we didn't know that it was there. I'm not going to sit here and say we knew and we didn't know. We didn't know. And so it became clear last year that that was there. And quickly it started to get attention from our, of course, provider partners, our individuals and families, kind of a panic of, oh no, what does that mean? Because we know many people in that service are actually making over 50% of minimum wage. So we've been working with a work group over the last several months to try to figure it out. But here's kind of where I am right now with you. We don't want the 50% to be the reason somebody does not get the service or they do get the service. The wages are not like it's an important piece of that large picture, but it isn't all of it. Here's our current problem in Ohio, like our situation. We call it a situation, it's not really a problem. Here's the situation. Is we are using the vocational habilitation service to support people long-term in facility-based work, okay? It's clear in the regulation and in the guidance we get from CMS, Medicaid dollars can't be used to support somebody to work in a job, just to work in a job to what they say is produce a good or do a service. Can't. They don't have money long-term to support somebody long-term to work. That their dollars and their money is to be used to help somebody build those skills that they need with hopes of getting as far as they can to working in the community. And that we have then services that can help somebody maintain that job in the community, but the goal is that we try to fade away as much as we can from that. In Ohio, we are using our vocational habilitation service to support individuals in long-term employment in a sheltered setting. We feel that is a risk in our system. We know in Ohio, just to kind of give you a perspective, there are 17,000 people that give this service across Ohio. 298 providers who are providing the service. When we look at that service and what's been paid out to that service in the last 18 months, it's $115 million are supporting individuals in that service long-term. When we look at the age of individuals in the service, the highest age range, about 50% of individuals in that service are between the ages of 22 and 37. Our highest age, our number one age in that service is 26. Across, and this is a state picture, you guys' picture might not look similarly. About 50 or 25% are about 50 and over, okay? So we really needed to, and over the last several months, the 50% wage rule has kind of really grabbed our attention, but it really addressing that is not going to address our larger issue in Ohio. So over the last several months in our work group, we've been meeting with providers, individuals and families. We actually, Kelly and her team, and our team called all 300 providers of vocational rehabilitation. We've been meeting with advocacy groups to say, here's the situation. We are sitting in a spot with this service that really could be a problem for us in Ohio when we know that the service is important to people. We want to have the service. It's important to providers and families. And what do we need to do, for lack of a better word, to kind of right-size it? How do we fix it so that we still have the service available? No one wants the service gone. We want the service available to people in Ohio, but if we don't fix it, there is potentially a high risk that a decision will be made on our behalf that we not have it available, okay? We don't want to get to that spot. We feel that we are at a spot where we can kind of control our own kind of destiny with Voc Hab and kind of what we want to have available. We do have flexibility with CMS if there's an issue to come up with justification and a resolution of what we feel that we can do. And there's a lot of things currently happening at the federal level and things that they're asking us. If we don't address it, we feel eventually we will have to and it will not be our decision. Okay, so we're trying to be proactive and be ahead of it to come up with a solution that the majority of us feel good about. So over the last several months, we've been calling people, we've been calling providers, we've been talking it through, we've been working with a work group every month, and here's where we've landed, okay, with Voc Hab. We want to have the service available. We want to have it available for people. In Ohio, it's been very clear, people want and need a free vocational service in Ohio. That service right now is called vocational rehabilitation. We want to have it available. What, though, we have to do is we have to right-size how we're using it. So some big things. We've got to make sure if somebody is getting that service that in fact that we're using it in a time-limited way, meaning that we aren't using it for that long-term employment, right? And so we have got some solutions that we feel that we can do that we'd like to implement that I'm going to talk to you about today. We also need to make sure that if a provider is providing a Voc Hab service, it is a service that's offered through what's called a home and community-based waiver. And so that is a responsibility of the provider then to make sure the service is happening as much as possible in somebody's community. It doesn't mean that they can't be served in a building or they can't be served in a facility, but there is a responsibility to help that person engage as much as they can, and this varies per person, with their community, get those services in what the language is non-disability specific locations, okay? It is all a very challenging situation. So that's the big pieces. So with Voc Hab, we met with the work group in December, and here's what we told them we wanted to do. You guys ready for that? Is it a good spot? Okay. So a couple things. We want to have the service available. In all of our engagement with stakeholders, a lot of people, I mean, majority, if not everyone, was absolutely concerned wholeheartedly about the individuals and the families that have their loved ones getting served in this service and what that means for them. In particular, the ones of most concern to the majority of people were those individuals who've been in the service about 20 years or longer. Okay? Our system had this created, and this was the service available to people prior to us taking Medicaid. So how can you come in and say that we have to disrupt this for individuals who've been in it for 20 years? It was 15, 20 years, it really varied, right? But it was always those who've been in it a really long time. Focus your attention, this is the ask, focus your attention on youth, focus your attention on more of working age adults. You've got to do something to leave the individuals alone who've been in it for a really long time. I'm kind of summarizing. It was all different discussions, but it was basically that. Leave a group of people alone, if you can. So what we feel that we can do, I'm going to tell you and talk this through with you. This has not been approved by our Department of Medicaid. This has not been approved by CMS. So none of this, like it is early stages, here's what we're thinking. We would like to, and we feel that we could, create a retirement service. Build a new service that is available to people 50 years of age or older who want to retire, where they can retire. And they are able to continue basically services as they are today without any disruption. It would be available, say you have a loved one who's 48, they could go into this service at 50, but there'd have to be some transition prior to that. But anybody could retire at 50. And basically the service, there would be no change. So a lot of people, when I say that, they ask, how is that possible when Medicaid doesn't fund long-term employment? But you're basically saying, they can continue working, they can continue earning money, nothing's going to happen. We still sit at a risk in Ohio. Creating the retirement service, saying things can continue, we still are at risk of our partners saying, no, we've got to change it. But we feel this, the larger work I'm going to describe to you justifies what we hear from our stakeholders, what we're being told that we really need to do for the best of our service system, and that we really have some things that we're doing for individuals 18 to 49 that we feel really needs to be the focus. And so we're really going to work hard, I know I'm being recorded, to not have anybody in hopes of looking at 50-year-old, right? 50 and over. Let them retire. It's 25% of people that we're supporting. 75%, we really feel like we can make some adjustments and changes, do better within our systems. We'll leave this group alone. So there's still risk here, but it's a risk we're willing to take. Does that make sense? Because we are working and doing some other things with the 1849. So, new service. Our timeline right now is to have a new service ready to go by July of 2020. Okay? Originally it was January of 2020, and then we heard from some county boards, please do it in July, not January. So July of 2020 is that focus right now where we have a new service. You would not have to go into the new service. It would be an option if there was a need. Go ahead, did you?
You keep talking, and then if there are just some SSAs in the room, so I wanted to just also throw out there that while there will be a new service, that the people who are receiving that service must also still meet the requirements of the Employment First Rule.
Correct. So maybe individuals would still, yes, thank you.
They still have to be on a place on the path. They still have to be working on skills. You want to measure progress. It's just that they won't have to leave the facility that they're in.
Right. So again, this is all here's what we'd like to do,
right,
but nothing has been approved.
Right.
So new service, retirement service. Second piece is in regards to the vocational habilitation service. We've tried for the last probably 5 years and even years before that to really work with teams to understand that this service is time limited and to really be okay with setting a person time limit. So we made some changes in April of 17 and really focused on that time limit and said we're not going to set a state time limit because this is really about the person and what they need and what it's gonna need to be. But you need to make sure, planning team, that it's time limited, that we really think about how long does somebody need this service, what other services we can help somebody move to. But we really, as a state system, have been challenged with implementing that time limit. It's really difficult to have these conversations. So at this point in time, we would like to put in place a state time limit of 2 years for that pre-vocational service. Medicaid would like us to report to them how many, the usage of the service and time limit. So it would be cumulative, so total, when the rule would be updated, the time limit would start then, and it would be 24 months cumulative total that somebody could have of that Voc Hab service without going through a prior auth. So somebody could get Voc Hab longer than those 24 months, but the SSAs would have to go through a prior authorization process, so a request to DODD to extend Voc Hab, and it would be an approval for a year extension, to extend Voc Hab for another year. That would correspond with somebody's span date for the planning. There's no limits to how many extensions somebody can get, but every time over those 24 months, it would have to go through a DODD authorization process. This does not need to be, I know when you say DODD prior authorization process, it probably, oh my God, like why? We, in order to kind of really get this time limit piece under control, we feel like that's the best approach, is doing a DODD approval process, but that is actually, we've written out a draft, it's 2 questions. Like, it's 2 questions that would live in our authorization system for SSAs to tell us. We would look at data we already have, so we already get reports on employment data, we already get data on authorizations, we get data on billing, so we would use in our assessment everything we already have, but then ask the SSAs to give us like really 2 more questions. Why does the individual need it? What's going on? Like why do you, like what's the reason? And it's good. And then, what are those goals and targets for the next year? So what is the individual going to be working on? And then it's hopefully a click of the button and it works and it's quick. We don't want to delay the authorization process or delay in any way someone getting the Voc Hab service. Right now, I'm in a meeting with Medicaid. It seems like they would expect us to report to them on a quarterly basis how many people are needing those extensions and what's going on. Okay? Yeah.
One thing real quick, that as the work group looked at this and time limitations, that they talked about other states, they visited with other states, that, and we asked, okay, how are you implementing pre-vocational services in your state? What do your plans look like? What's your person-centered planning process? How do you oversee that process? And so all of that information was gathered from 8 other states, and most of them have time limitations to that pre-vocational service. So that also contributed to that discussion and that decision making.
Yeah, so like Kelly said, we looked at 8 other states to see what they were doing, spoke to many of the states, let the stakeholder, our work group, talk to the other states. I will be honest, as most states have a pre-vocational service, but the pre-vocational services do not look like us in Ohio. Other states do have sheltered employment, but Medicaid funding is not paying for it. So New Jersey, vocational rehabilitation dollars pay for it. In Missouri, education, the Department of Education in Missouri actually pays for sheltered work for it to be maintained. The only state that I could get close to that looked similar to us was New York, where they were using Medicaid dollars to pay for long-term employment and sheltered work. And in 2014, CMS came in for something else, like totally different residential side, and they got wind of what was happening in sheltered work, and that stopped. There was no new entries into sheltered work, period, with Medicaid money in 2014. So we're keeping a really just close eye. Like, I'm not trying to scare, like, I don't want to scare, but it's like, how can we get ahead of it where we can really have it, a service available that's going to work for people, that we can make some tweaks